Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. We are recording, so if you need to refer back to this or if you come in a little bit later, that's something you can revisit. But my name is Carmen, not Cameron Diaz. I'm here with the Advocacy Committee of the New York State Teachers of English to Speakers of Other Language organization, NYS TESOL. At NYS TESOL, we're nice. And I would just want to remind you that we're doing this session. We have some questions and things to get you thinking about advocacy for your ELLs. We don't have all the answers, but we like to collaborate. So if you want to reach out to us, feel free to contact us. We are also putting the link to the bit.ly. You can have access to this slideshow for later on in the chat. I'll put that in right now. And we're going to go ahead and get started. Are we ready, team?
Ready.
Yep. Excellent. Okay, so this is the Advocating for ELLs as Schools Reopen session. It's presented by the NYS TESOL Advocacy Committee. I just want to remind you, if you haven't already, check out our website. It's pretty awesome if you haven't been there in a while. And if you are a member, welcome. We're super excited to have you. If you're not, I would encourage you to check out our site. There's lots of perks to being a member. So I am Carmen Diaz. If I could just have the rest of the contributors quickly just introduce themselves, that would be great.
Hi, my name is Susan LaFond. I'm an assistant research and educational services at New York State United Teachers and former ELL teacher.
Thank you.
I am Christine Passarelli. I'm an ELL teacher in District 31, Staten Island at PS 22. I've been an ELL educator for the past 13 years and teaching I'm going into my 17th year total teaching.
Thank you.
My name is Dorothy Caldone. I'm an ELL teacher in District 14 in Brooklyn. This is my 8th year teaching. So good afternoon.
Hi, my name is Lisa. I'm a K-2 ELL teacher in Staten Island, New York. I've been teaching ELL for almost 6 years now.
Hi everyone, my name is Jasmine Bird. I'm an ELL coordinator in the Bronx and I've been teaching for about 7 years.
Excellent, thank you. And I believe I saw our NYS TESOL president jump in. So if she has a minute, Laura, if you're there, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
I am. I have really bad hair, so you can just look at my picture there. But I just want to thank everyone, especially Carmen, who's been an amazing VP for advocacy for New York TESOL for almost 2 years. And we are going to be really, really sad as she steps off and rotates in a new VP advocacy. And I want to thank all the committee members, Susan, Christine, Jasmine, Dorothy, Lisa, and everybody. It's great to have all of you here tonight. It's such a, or this afternoon, it feels like the night already. This is such a burning topic. And so I really appreciate all of you pulling this together for us. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. So if you don't follow us already, please check it out. We've got Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We're pretty active on there. And if you are also active, make sure you tag NYS TESOL as a member because we want to see what you're doing in the field too. Next slide, please. Thank you. So today's plan, we want to make sure that you are armed with the advocacy tools to be able to advocate for your multilingual learners. Oh, I see we have some ELLs in Connecticut in our chat. Thank you. Please introduce yourself in the chat. Feel free, collaborate. You've got lots of knowledge, not just our advocacy committee here, but also your colleagues here as well. So our ideas for today's topic are to talk about reopening plans specifically, and we came up with these topics based on a lot of conversations and questions we've been getting. I don't know if you're familiar with my work. I work for the Regional Bilingual Education Resource Network, the ARBERN in the Capital District region. If you don't know what your ARBERN is, go check out your ARBERN. It is a free resource. It is grant funded. But we've been getting a lot of these questions from district leaders and ELL teachers and bilingual teachers about reopening plans, specifically intake concerns, including timelines and things. What does instruction for ELLs look like? Because if you were a teacher back in March this year, you know that sometimes your ELLs were the ones left out of the picture, and we want to make sure that doesn't happen to start this year. Progress monitoring, what does that mean for ELL? And also supporting parents. So each of us kind of took lead on a specific topic, and if you have questions. I know we've got questions. We don't always have the answers for you, but we're happy to collaborate so that you can bring intelligent questions to your administrators and say, hey, have you thought about this, to help you advocate for your ELLs? Because that's what we do at the Advocacy Committee. And really, when you join this field, that's what you signed up to do too. You're all advocates. So thank you for being here. Next slide, please.
Good. Went a little too fast. Just adding a link in the chat. So I have a poll here. Let me see. I haven't done a poll before, so let's see if this works. Here it is. Let me launch this poll. We're going to ask that everybody respond to the first 3 questions here. Have you reviewed your school or your district's reopening plan? Yes or no? What will be the mode or modes of instruction with your students? In person, completely online, hybrid, multiple, or I'm not quite sure. And how prepared do you feel for the reopening of your school? I'm going to give another 20 seconds. Actually, I'm going to give less than 20 seconds. I want to make sure people can access the poll. Get your voice heard. That's how you advocate. As you speak up, you speak out. And I'm going to close this so you can see the results. Well, the good news is the majority of people, 3/4, have reviewed their school district, their school or their district's reopening plan, but there's still 1/4 who have not. Interesting to see what the schools or districts are calling for the modes of instruction. It looks like hybrid is the most common. And as for the preparedness, it looks pretty positive that we've got almost half feel somewhat prepared, and then we still have another 11%. So the majority feel somewhat prepared to prepared, where about 40% not prepared at all. So what we hope to do is tap into some ideas, some suggestions, some requests that you have as NYS TESOL to perhaps continue to offer webinars, resources, things that you can use to help you be ready.
And don't forget to check out upcoming webinars. I did put the link to the NYS TESOL webinars in the chat. We're trying to be really responsive, and our president, Laura, has really done a great job of trying to reach out saying, you know, these are the things we need, who can provide these resources, because we know, like you, many of us are feeling very scared, anxious, but also eager to learn more so that we can get ready for the next year. So check out the webinars link in the chat.
So all districts and schools are mandated, have been mandated to submit plans for reopening, and the New York State Education Department released a framework, and I'm not sure if you have seen the framework. I'm going to click here, and that's going to just jump over to the framework. I did put the framework in the chat. I'll add that again to make sure you can see, and the framework is not popping up there. Let me see if I can pull that up over here then. So this was the reopening guidance that you can see, you can download, you can review if you choose. This is what the district used to help them create their reopening plans. These plans have been reviewed by Department of Health for the health and safety components of it. And New York State Education Department is looking more at the instruction side of it. And a criteria was used to review the plans. Some plans need to be amended if they're deficient and they don't meet the set criteria. And the issues in the submitted plans across the state have been clear directives for positive cases and the procedures that will follow. So these are the areas that plans, if most of them that have been deficient, are in these areas, and that's what to do if there is a positive case. How are they going to quarantine staff and students in the buildings? How will they set up contact tracing? And how will they communicate the building closure and the reopening plan to both staff and families. Governor Cuomo has required that districts complete 3 to 5 public sessions, so 3 to suburban, urban, rural schools, 5 public sessions for the big 5 districts, New York City, Buffalo, Rochester, and the other big 5, with parents and teachers, and all districts must post their plans for remote learning, testing, and tracing on their website by August 21st, and today's the 24th, to be in compliance with standards established by the state. There is a link here, and I believe this is being updated, and that will show, let's see if I can find my chat room. Okay, I'll have to find that. So if they're not posted, that will need to be done. I also have a link here. I'm losing my chat box here, which is my problem. Up there it is. Okay. So here's the link for all the school reopening plans that have been posted. If you want to see which ones have been posted, which ones have not. Next for the information is specifically on what schools and districts must do from State Ed's framework. And some of these are practices that have been established ahead of time. They're not new, such as providing all communication to families in the preferred language and mode of communication. Now, is that happening? Maybe not always, so that's really important that districts do abide by that. But this meets the needs of all students, including the distinctive needs of our English learners. And schools aren't obligated to find ways to serve all the students, even during these times of disruption when remote learning requires students to connect from home. That includes creating and fostering culturally responsive, student-centered learning environments that affirm racial, linguistic, and cultural identities, that prepare students for rigor and independent learning, that develop students' abilities to connect across lines of difference, elevate historically marginalized voices, and empower students as agents of social change. Now, that sounds like a mouthful, but that all comes out of State Ed's framework. In addition, regular and frequent communication must take place between districts and families in order to establish two-way engagement. And that's under Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA. So according to State Ed's reopening guidance, reopening plans must address the learning loss experienced by many English learners in their English language development, as well as the master of their content area knowledge. So it's the combination of the language and the content area. And the department has identified 4 requirements or considerations that will allow schools to provide English language learner services that address the impact of last year's school closures and prepare them for potential challenges in the coming year. And those 4 requirements or considerations are, and that's that first one, is providing communications in the preferred language mode of communication. Ensure that all English learners receive appropriate instruction with required instructional units of study in their English as a new language or bilingual education program based on their most recently measured English language proficiency level, which was last year's either NYS or the initial testing. Conduct ELL identification for all students who enrolled during the COVID-related school closures in 2019-20, so last school year, during this summer of 2020, and during the first 20 days of 2020 to 21, the school year within 30 days of the start of that school year. And the last requirement and consideration is to recognize that all teachers are teachers of English learners, and that districts and schools must provide professional learning opportunities related to the instruction and support of ELLs to all educators, which is also required by Part 154 of the Commissioner Regulations. I'm going to add 2 more links to the chat box. This is supporting English learners in the COVID-19 crisis. And that is from the Great City Schools. It's a great resource. And the next one is assessing English language learner proficiency during extended school closures. And again, I've lost my chat box. Sorry about that. When I have a chance, I will find my chat box and get that back in there. So I want to move forward with, I've given you a little bit of background sharing from State Ed's materials that have been shared to the public, but I'm going to ask that you go to the Padlet. Oh, I'm sorry. First, I want to share the potential questions. If somebody can put that in there, I don't know why I can't see my chat box. Oh, I just found my chat box. It was hidden. Here we go. There's that first document I talked about. And then that's the Padlet. If you can put in the questions, I can just open my thingy a little more. Sorry, I'm holding you all up here trying to find the link.
I put the Padlet link in the chat.
All right, and it is in the Padlet link. So if you go to the Padlet, there is within the Padlet a link, and that goes to a shared document. And that's reopening questions for consideration from an ELL perspective. And this is a resource that you have access to and you can look at based on different topics. I'm only going to point you to the school reopening plan. You can take a look at some of these questions to address. And these are questions to bring back to your school or to your district. So in the Padlet, what I'd ask that you do is under that first column, what we'd like you to do is share comments, questions, or what do you need? What could NYS TESOL do for you? How can we support you? Is there a webinar you'd like to see? Is there a resource? And as you put your questions, your comments, what you're looking for, you may have someone else read that and respond to you with a link, with information. So if you could visit that Padlet and jot down what it is you need.
And this will be open throughout the session. So as we speak, if we're not answering your specific questions, I know we have a lot of participants on the line today, so thank you so much for coming. But feel free to add those questions to the Padlet because 9 times out of 10, somebody else has that question too. Don't be shy.
And I'm gonna finish up my section with just some resources. And we are sharing the link for the PowerPoint, so you can go back and refresh your memory about any of these. I did share the reopening plans, and I'll place that link in there again. Please do not forget nystesol.org. Go back there, put that in your favorites, bookmark that. I do want to share that New York State United Teachers offers some wonderful training, and it's called Being Prepared for What's Ahead Instructionally and Emotionally. And as you reach the landing page, you'll see that there's assessment, differentiating instruction and curriculum for learner needs, interdisciplinary teaching, social emotional supports, and technology training. So as you click these, you will see the training that New York State United Teachers offers for members. So I hope you do visit that. I will place that link in there for you. And with that, I want to say thank you and move on. Oh, don't forget Arbor, of a plethora of training and information And Support Ed has a wonderful 10 keys for EL master plans that I wanted to put in there. Actually, Carmen had shared that. You can see that at getsupported.net, and I'll place that link in there as well. So I will move on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Susan.
Hi, I'm Lisa. So I'm going to talk about intake concerns. The guidance had emergency changes due to COVID. So schools will now have the first 30 days to go through the ELL identification process due to students who enrolled in 2019, 2020 during COVID over the school year. And after this time period, the regular 10-day process will resume. Some concerns we have with intake are how we will connect with families during implementation of COVID safety measures. Thinking about if families will be allowed in the building to complete all the necessary documents, how we will connect with families virtually, and they will be in need of translation services as well. Schools should utilize language paraprofessionals in the school building. And another concern would be, how are we assessing students with the NYS TESOL? This can be very challenging while wearing PPE and our face masks, and how will we give them, a fair assessment and get their appropriate language level?
Lisa, can I just pause you for a second?
Sure. Yeah.
We have a poll going on so that we can
I'm sorry, forgot about the poll.
I would love to be able to spend more time on the things that people are most concerned about. And Lisa, you have some awesome information you're going over. So the poll for right now is, what is your main concern regarding the ELL intake process during the 2020-2021 school year? So we've got assessing with the NYS TESOL, interviewing families and students while following COVID-19 CDC guidelines, scheduling and meeting New York State mandated minutes, and home language supports for families of ELLs. So take a moment, choose the one you are most concerned about. And Lisa has some great information she's going to talk about in just a minute. It looks like we have like 72% voted. The most concerning is scheduling and meeting New York State mandated minutes. Awesome. Yes, it's a concern we're getting too. All right, Lisa, you ready?
Yeah, so another concern, just to go back to that, is making sure we don't miss any ELL students that came in during COVID-19 from March 2020 till the present time, and make sure they're receiving their entitled ENL services. Also, scheduling, like that was just mentioned, is going to be very challenging. So we have to advocate to make sure that ENL students get their entitled services and mandated minutes. We need to collaborate with classroom teachers to best come together to meet the needs of the newly enrolled ELLs throughout the school year, because we're gonna have to work as a team, some remote teachers, some in-person teachers. So collaboration is very important. The next slide is also another summary of what I just spoke about, that we're gonna have extended time to go through the ELL identification process. And then also new enrolling students must be provisionally placed in bilingual education while waiting NYS TESOL results. So we're waiting for more information on that, how we will proceed with, the NYS TESOL. That's basically it for this section. Some questions that we might ask is how can we meet the needs of ELL families during blended learning? Some ideas would be to hold virtual information sessions, school town halls, maybe collaboration with your literacy coach, parent outreach, parent workshops. So we have to find a way to make it helpful for our ELL families. Also, how can your school community ensure parents receive information they need in their home language? We have to ensure that our families are getting the information they need throughout the school year. Another question comes up we just talked about, the scheduling. How will minutes be met during blended learning? So how will we combine the minutes in person and also on, online? Will the ENL teacher be pushing in, working remotely, or a combination of both? These are all some things we can think about. Also, again, collaboration. We're all going to have to collaborate with one another to be successful and ensure that families and students receive the services and support that they need. You can go to the Padlet if you want to add any additional questions.
And I saw some questions in the chat, all great questions about where can we get information about SIFE, where can we get information about units of study. I will encourage you, I am gonna put in the chat a link to the actual reopening guidance that Susan shared in one of the earlier slides. I would encourage you to check pages 97, 98. It does talk about units of study, but I just want to encourage you to think about, what does engagement look like? And those are the conversations that are happening at the state level right now. I'm on one of the task forces to create a Q&A that talks about, what does blended learning look like? What does a unit of study minute count as if you are doing hybrid learning or if you're doing asynchronous learning, not at the same time? Like if you're watching a recording of this and you're not live with us, you're doing this asynchronously. Can we do that with our ELLs with success? So really, we're being very careful about the language because we don't want to just say you have flexibility, because think about what happens with our ELLs if people say we have flexibility. Sometimes our ELLs get pushed to the back burner, and we know that right now they need to be on the front burners. So for sure, we want to be concerned of that. And those questions for advocacy that Lisa has crafted for you can definitely help you ask those right questions to your administrators to make sure your ELLs are being served. Susan, we want to move on to the next section.
Okay, if people have a chance to go to the Padlet and jot down resources they're looking for, additional training, any other questions, concerns for the intake. Okay. I'm going to open that poll.
All right, so before we begin with the topic of instruction for ELLs during this time, I just wanted to underscore what Carmen was saying about the advocacy questions. It's a great resource for me as a coordinator and teacher in my school. I'm planning to use that resource to bring to my administration and just kind of check off and underline the ones that I'm most concerned about to start that conversation. So just see them as conversation points. We just started our poll for instruction for the So we're asking you, in which area do you anticipate needing the most support in regards to instruction of ELL students? So we have 4 options for you to choose from. We're asking for everyone to engage in the poll as a way to advocate for our students and gauge what is needed in our ELL community. So one area is curriculum, considering modifications for remote learning and co-planning. Programming, so that question about minutes and scheduling I just saw in the chat, method of instruction, co-teaching technology, and then special consideration, so the translation interpretation needs. I'm gonna give maybe 10 more seconds to see.
Okay, I'll close the poll now.
It looks like, it's pretty close between, but then the programming is a close second. Okay, so one thing I do want to underscore for this section as well is that we're presenting you the general guidelines coming from the regulations and at the state level, but it's important to note that a lot of these decisions and questions that you have are going to be addressed at the district and school level. And so we'll give you some general information in this section, and I'll address your questions through the Padlet or as we go through the presentation, but I just wanted to give that disclaimer. Also, one thing that has been giving me peace during this extremely challenging, unprecedented time. I modified it a little bit. So do what you can with all you have, wherever you are. But I modified it to say, do what you can with what you have, wherever you are, acknowledging just our whole, you know, we are whole professionals, we're whole people. So our lives are not entirely work. We're just doing the best we can with what we have. So in this section, we'll just quickly go over the overview of the related regulations, recommendations from the NYS UT, and then general suggestions for instruction. And Susan, you can turn to the next slide. All right, so I'm not going to read over the language from the regulations, but I did highlight the key points so that you have a clear reference point when you do have those conversations with your administrators and with your curriculum teams. And actually, sorry, Susan, can you go back one more slide? However, I did draw attention to these 3 points that are coming from the regulations. So basically, we're going to continue with the designated ELL services by the current ELL proficiency level. So whatever was last tested. And also, it's very important, this one I hadn't really considered initially, but it's very important that we review the former ELLs who are approaching their third-year services upon exiting. So these ELLs may not actually need services coming into this upcoming year, but considering how last school year ended, and just, you know, all the demands that come with the setting, you should also plan for maybe supporting them additionally in a way that we wouldn't have had before. And then the last point is, as I was saying before, districts and schools determine school-specific reopening plans and programming formats. So we're just giving you an overview, a general overview today. And if you would like more resources, or if you'd like for us to expand on any particular point, please make sure you add it to the chat or to the Padlet. All right, so these are the general recommendations coming from the NYS UT. And I love that they put them in a beautiful infographic. Of course, as an ENL teacher, I love that type of thing. And that's going to be on the next slide. But before we get there, I just wanted to highlight these points. So creating manageable co-teaching schedules, these are things that you bring to your administrators and have that open conversation to make sure everybody's set up for success going into this year. The NYS UT is emphasizing collaboration and the co-teaching relationship. So they're considering the co-teaching schedules, and also being thoughtful and pairing co-teachers and scheduling time for co-planning. So we hear that echoed in some of the other recommendations a little bit later. If it was successful in the past year, trying to just keep the pairs together. Also, generally establishing a supportive working environment for co-teaching and collaboration. And that comes through providing staff with PD, and there are a couple of other recommendations. And I'm speaking kind of quickly. I hope it's all that you're getting everything I'm saying, but just so you know, when you get the link to the PowerPoint in the title, you see that there's all this information with even more details hyperlinked. So if you click on the NYS UT in the title, then you can read a little bit more about how to make these bullet points actionable and happen in your school community. And then, of course, they're emphasizing the PD for those co-teaching pairs. And then this is very important for that conversation with administrators. So in the discussion of how evaluations will be conducted, which there are so many questions about, one way to make it equitable for ENL teachers is to observe them when they are in their standalone setting or with supported integrated settings. And a supported integrated setting means that within that co-teaching classroom, that integrated setting, the teachers have a scheduled set time, at least one period a week, to co-plan. So that's one way of making it a little bit more equitable for the ENL teachers. Okay, and so here's that cool infographic I was telling you about. It's harder to read on this screen, but you do have the link to it. And this is another way of, another resource you can use as staff and also as a reference point for having those conversations. For me, as a coordinator and teacher, I'm planning to use the guiding questions at the right side here to help me kind of orient as we go into the year and begin planning. So things like determining responsibilities and roles in whatever setting you will be in, and also considering the co-teaching models, how you'll adopt them. So those are just some like quick 3 questions that I personally plan to use when I'm having the conversations with my co-teachers and admin. Okay, and I'm seeing a lot of great comments in the chat box and feeling actually very encouraged seeing your commentary here about this spirit of collaboration, because yes, I agree that even though these are challenging circumstances, there are definitely silver linings and opportunities for us to do something innovative and new. I'm commenting specifically on observing peers and providing feedback. All right, so this is the last section. These are the general suggestions about instruction for ELLs, coming specifically from Coleraine, Colorado. And this one, again, you can access the direct link when you receive the slideshow. So for this one, it focuses on a little bit more the relationships within the school community. So considering all stakeholders. And it's talking especially about the translation interpretation protocols. We have different language for what this looks like throughout the state. In the city, I know that it's the language access coordinator who is the point person for interpretation and translation. I know it has different names around the city, but consider those people in your school community. They mentioned the parent coordinator, the parent teacher association. Consider those partnerships and how to leverage them to best support our ELL students. Also, of course, this is probably something that your schools are doing already, but determining what remote learning access is needed, we have to make sure for our ELLs that there's that level of language accessibility for them. Considering the format, whether it's virtual or paper sent home, you have to make sure there's a plan in place so that they're getting it in the language that they needed. And then one excellent resource that was shared from this site, and I know also NYS TESOL, we offered these resources as well. There are some tutorials for this technology in different languages available. So this is a direct link to multilingual Google Classroom tutorials, but also on NYS TESOL's website, we have that available too as well for different platforms. And then the very last point here, which is part of what this space is for, just considering all the needs and all the tools and ideas that we have during this time. If you look at the very bottom where there's a star, it's asking you to also consider practical instructional modifications like clear face masks so that students have a visual reference for pronunciation. So little things like that, that's what we're hoping to share and foster a sense of community and within this platform so that we can share best practices. As we transition, if you have any best practices that you've already been discussing, you can feel free to share that in the chat. So maybe beyond clear face mask, your school is doing something else different or innovative during this time. All right, so for the last section, I'm not going to read through the questions, but I'm just going to reiterate that you can use the resource that Susan is sending out with the document of questions to bring to your admin and to continue this, well, to begin and to continue this discussion. These are specific to instruction. And in that document right here, as you see, it's each section is labeled by what we're covering during this presentation, but also some other topics that you may be wondering about, some things that I saw come up in the chat. All right, and so that's all I have for you today. But again, if you have any great ideas, innovative ideas for instructional approaches that you're planning to use during this time, please feel free to add them to the chat box or to our Padlet.
I have a question. Hello, can you hear me?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so at the end of last year, my district recognized that ELLs and special ed kids did the worst with distance learning and decided they would have to do something different come September. They have done something different with special ed. We're in a hybrid. So you see the kids 2 days a week, and then 2 days a week they watch you teach synchronistically. So the special ed kids are just coming in all 4 days and will be able to meet with their teachers for help. But ELL wasn't even put on the calendar until after I called the principal and reminded him. And so he just lumped them in with general ed, which means they only get face-to-face instruction 2 days a week. And I don't think there are any regs that I can bring to him to say this is insufficient, but we all know it's insufficient. It didn't work. And I'm not sure how to advocate for my kids.
Do you mind if I jump in and make a suggestion?
Not at all.
Oh, great. So thank you so much for being here. This is an excellent question. So one of the things that the Provisional Services for ELLs memo did state back in May was that administrators, districts had to track missed minutes of instruction for ELLs. So one of the things that teachers and administrators are doing to advocate for either in-person learning or some kind of structured co-planning time for online or hybrid learning to make sure that ELLs are brought to the forefront is taking those missed minutes data and really their attendance policies. So if you know how many days that they attended during remote learning, you know, you can subtract that and say how many days they missed during remote learning. So what you can do is bring that data to the forefront and say, this is what my students, this is the percentage of time my students showed up or were missing during from March to June. Now, can you imagine September until the foreseeable future? What is that attendance data going to look like, and how are we going to do better for our ELLs because they deserve better?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna have to work with guidance about getting hold of attendance from a previous year. But if I can, I think that's a great start. Thank you.
Good luck.
One other suggestion I have coming from the city perspective, all city schools were required to submit an addendum to their existing language plans. And so you can go to any of the school's websites online and you'll see the modifications they're making to their building-wide plans in regards to curriculum and even programming. So maybe you can use one of those as just a place to get some ideas of how to modify your school's approach and address those concerns that you have. That's called the Language Allocation Policy Addendum. I'll put it in the chat box.
Thank you. We don't have push-in. I'm the one teacher for typically 6 through 8, but sometimes 6 through 12. So I'm a standalone program.
If I can just share that in my district in North Rockland, what they've decided to do, because we have a large ELL population, I'm a bilingual teacher, I'm starting my 11th year as a bilingual teacher. They've decided that because of the amount of loss of English language learning loss due from the COVID from March to June, plus the additional time that the kids have been at home speaking Spanish only or not learning English, sufficient English, they've found that these kids are the most vulnerable in language learning and therefore are going to be in school Monday through all days and at 100% capacity. So my class, instead of having 20 or 22 students, I'm going to have half the capacity split into 2 classes. One TA will be with one class and I will be with the other and I will switch back and forth. But they found that they were the most vulnerable, therefore they needed to be in school 100% of the time.
That's what I'm aiming for.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so we're going to be.
I don't know if you can see the framework, the state ed's framework that mentions the learning loss and how that needs to be part of reopening plans. So that's where putting it back to the district to say, what are you going to do?
Thanks.
And I did put the quote in there for the missed minutes about tracking from spring, basically, in order to plan delivery of instruction upon the return to school. So. And we have a big topic of progress monitoring as well. So, and feel free to continue to utilize the chat and the Padlet. We're monitoring that. So here's our poll. Ready, Christine?
Yes. Thank you. Okay, so as we're getting ready to discuss progress monitoring, we have a poll to share. We want to know, considering that there was no administration of the NYS TESOL in spring of 2020, what do you think is the most important item to consider when choosing progress monitoring tools for ELL students? So is it an assessment that includes all four modalities, so listening, speaking, reading, writing? Is it an assessment that will measure language proficiency along with content knowledge? Is it an assessment that encompasses the theories of culturally sustaining responsive educational framework? Or an assessment that will provide strategies to support learners after analysis of scores? Almost like the three-way split. So I'm seeing that we have most of our responses are looking like we need those results that are similar to the NYS TESOL to really give us the most information about our students. But we also want to connect language proficiency along with content knowledge, because that's also what they're going to be assessed on in their classrooms. That's also part of the NYS TESOL is also now measuring content knowledge, academic language. And we know as teachers, we have a lot going on. We're not going to be with our students. Most of us aren't going to be with our students face-to-face 5 days a week. It's going to be some form of a hybrid model, if not fully remote. And we want some form of a tool that's going to give us access to an analysis of their scores and some tips, some things that we can do for our students right away. So it looks like that's where the results are falling. Close the poll. And so now we're moving on to our topic of progress monitoring. So again, there's very related regulations, the blueprint for English language learners and multilingual learners. Success says that we need to adopt progress monitoring tools to measure ELL proficiency. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but some things that were highlighted also is that you need to adapt or develop or adopt progress monitoring tools to provide data that identifies gaps in student learning towards English language proficiency and towards content area proficiency in both English and the students' home languages. So for many of us, our little guys in kindergarten through second grade, the only, state assessment they may be taking is that NYS TESOL, and they didn't have that. But our students from grades 3 through high school, they missed out on the NYS TESOL, they missed out on the ELA exam, they missed out on the state content exams of math, science, which would have been given to them in English and their native language. And so now we're stuck in this position where we're going to be starting school in September, and we don't have a fresh set of data in front of us to tell us where our students left off. So we need to start looking at what kind of tools do we have access to, what kind of progress monitoring can we use to track our students and continue to see growth without a NYS TESOL. I did see in the chat someone said, will we be administering the NYS TESOL in the spring? None of us know. I mean, I think each day we take it as it comes. We have no idea if or when we're going to be back into schools 100%. So the NYS TESOL 2021 seems so far off, but it's probably not. It's a big question mark, but we're going to be hopeful. Thanks. Yep, Carmen, we got to cross our fingers and just hope that we get it. We know that, our newcomers will be getting the NYS TESOL once we get back in school buildings, but for now, any potential ELLs are provisionally being, serviced as ELL students until they officially get that assessment. But without the NYS TESOL, what are we going to do? So next slide. We have, on the next slide, we have progress monitoring suggestions, things that you can bring to the table. So it's also saying here that we must find new methods, that local progress monitoring assessment tools, so district leaders are encouraged to formalize the use of existing monitoring tools, implement them, develop instructional goals. So as teachers, we know that we need to be setting up goals according to the standards for our students. As E&L teachers, we should be doing that alongside with our students, you know, classroom teachers, co-teachers, and making sure that we use that data that we collect to plan and modify and differentiate our instruction for the students. Correct me if I'm wrong, Carmen. I think we have something with the access to the SIFE screener. Has it been?
Yes. So the MLS, the multilingual screener for SIFE, you know, with budgets and things at the state, there's a gap in funding right now. It's not available on the website. However, there are different tools you can use to be able to assess students in native languages, including utilizing an interpreter if you need to. Just do the best you can with that. But we have word from the state that the intention is to put the MLS screener back up into practice. So if you're looking for that and you're wondering why is that, I mean, just look at budgets statewide. I'm hoping it hasn't impacted those of you on the call, but if you haven't heard, it's scary this year. It could be scarier next year. So just hold tight.
Thanks, Carmen. So next slide. So as an E&L teacher, you want to be able to advocate for proper tools to monitor and assess your students. So some of the questions that you can ask are, how is progress monitoring of ELLs different from our existing progress monitoring protocols? So when we do progress monitoring of students with disabilities, or even if we use AIS, who is going to be responsible for the progress monitoring of ELLs and language modalities? It's most likely going to be the E&L teacher. Also, I feel that who is responsible for progress monitoring ELLs and content area in order to inform the instructional practices? And the last question that I bring to you is, how might this progress monitoring of ELLs contribute to report cards, progress reports for ELLs? As an E&L teacher in New York City, I know that it's very frustrating when I have to fill out report card grades for our students, and because of language, they don't always necessarily hit those grade level standards. So this could possibly lead to an E&L specific report card that focuses on individual student progress versus the deficits related to grade level standards. I encourage you to share any additional requests or questions that you have in the Padlet. Thinking about progress monitoring, there are many tools available. My experience, I'm sharing here that there are things like formal running records to assess your students' reading levels. So if you use Fountas and Pinnell, Teachers College, maybe Reading A to Z, those are all great resources so that you can track, making sure that your students are hitting those grade level reading levels, and you're going to take that information, hopefully share it with the classroom teacher. I know that in my school, co-teachers and I will split the work, and we will both equally assess our students so that we're communicating where our students are at and what we need to do together to help them continue to make progress. You also want to look at things like, again, a lot of schools are using online platforms such as iReady or Imagine Learning. Those programs are online. They have diagnostic assessments that can be utilized, that can give you feedback on how your students are doing, and then place them into lessons and activities that are tailored to their needs. And if you're able to, you can use those diagnostics several times throughout the school year, because we do know, again, without a NYS flat, we need to really be on top of our students to make sure that we are tracking the progress and making sure that they are not falling even further behind. Something else that's also very useful is there are teacher-made assessments that we can use. We can utilize ReadWorks. It's not always the best as far as like for lining up with reading levels and grade levels, but it can be modified. I know that some districts have used it to assess listening skills. I myself have used it to utilize it as a tool to assess listening skills so that I can get some kind of a gauge for the NYS TESOL. And another tool that I've used is the ELL periodic assessment. Again, this is only available for grades 3 and up, but it's usually administered, it's optional. It's an optional assessment offered in the fall and in the spring. It's very time consuming for me, that's my experience. And I'd like to be able to get more time with my students. However, this is a tool that we might want to look at very heavily this year without a NYS TESOL because the ELL periodic assessment aligns directly to the NYS TESOL, and it can give us a lot of data to help us inform and drive our instruction. Okay, so we're going to be moving on to our last section. I believe that's Dorothy.
Hi, so in this section, I'm going to be discussing what are the regulations around parent support and family support, what documents we should be providing for, here's our parent support, and what we need to be providing for our parents, but I'm also really interested to hear what you guys are doing in your schools to reach out. So our question is, how is your school ensuring all parents receive information in their home language? Are you calling parents with translation services or translating yourself, sending the emails, posting documents on the remote learning platform? Is there anything else that you want to include either on the chat or the Padlet or all above? Okay, awesome. So it looks like everybody's been doing all of the above. And I saw in the chat someone put in Zoom Meets, which is an awesome idea. And we've been trying to do the weekly Zoom meetings with everyone. But yeah, that definitely would be included in our parent outreach. So I'm going to just skip to the next slide. And that was kind of our poll question. Okay, so these are the regulations. So again, I'm just going to kind of go over some highlighted areas, and I'm going to include some of my own experiences with parent communication and outreach. So as we were saying, as we know, during the remote learning experience, some of our students are experiencing the language loss within their development. So in order to address this, we have our requirements to continue obviously providing our ELLs with their services, but also to consistently reach out to the parents to make sure that they understand issues involving remote learning, how to use the technology, how to get technology, and what are our hybrid model is going to be looking like for the upcoming school year. So the first bullet point was to provide all communication to parents and guardians of ELLs in their preferred language and mode of communication. So for me, from my experience, a mode of communication was actually something that stood out and something that I had to reconsider. We had been posting on our Google Classroom and our Class Dojo, and we were emailing parents, but something that I found the most effective was really just calling parents. A few weeks ago, I just called all of my parents to explain when we had the school survey, just to explain, what the survey entailed, what parents had to do to vote, and I found that really effective. It just seemed like my parents preferred just having that phone call, that conversation one-on-one, and they also brought up a lot of issues that they had that they wanted to ask, the principal or administration. So just to kind of keep that in mind when you're talking to parents, they may not always be as, tech savvy or on their phones as much, that it might be useful to just call and just see where people are having issues. So the other point, the school reopening plan must address meaningful parent engagement in the parents' preferred language. So again, we have, the majority of my parents are Spanish speaking, so I'm able to call them directly. For our parents that don't speak Spanish, I know there's a translation service that you can call to get your phone call translated. And Class Dojo was pretty good because they also had, they translate in real time. So it's kind of like a chat feature, but like my parent that speaks Mandarin, she's able to talk to me directly and have my words translated, and then I can see the translation of her words. So that's been really helpful. So again, you know, it's really important to consider that we have to provide all communication, all the forms, surveys, all of that must be made available to our parents in their home language. So that's something that, you know, we would have to bring up for our parents. So I'm just going to go to, so like we said, again, the ELLs have to be provided with their supports in order to close the potential learning loss. I guess I'm just gonna skip to the next slide. Something that I think we have to just bring up quickly was just to maintain regular communication. Like I said, we had the 3 to 5 mandated meetings, but we're also trying to keep a weekly meeting with all of our parents just so they're aware of what's going to be happening as far as reopening goes. Again, down here, the highlighted piece that says school districts should, to the greatest extent possible, provide interpretation and translation. So that's something that you might want to look at if you're having trouble getting something in a language that parents understand. And I guess the last slide, if you can turn to that, or the next slide. Oh, okay. Okay, yeah.
You want it?
Great. And then the question slide, sorry. The next slide, I think it is. Yeah, so then these were just the questions that I was gonna ask. I'll leave them up here. But if there's anything else you're doing to communicate with your parents, it would be great to have that on the chat or in the Padlet. And then these are just some questions to consider if you have your own questions to bring up as well.
This is Katie Kryakovich from the UFT. I'm sorry, I tried to post in the chat, but for some reason I'm not able to enter. So I just wanted to give a shout out to anyone out there from the UFT and to say if you want to join us with New York City Advocacy, we would love to have you join our focus group. Evelyn De Jesus runs it through the United Federation of Teachers. And so it's just my first initial and last name, K Kryakovich at uft.org. We've been in discussions throughout the summer with the Division of Multilingual Learners, and it is just incredibly powerful to be able to bring them questions and examples of what's happening in the field. So, you know, please reach out and we can work together. But this was a great webinar. Thank you. NYS TESOL is just amazing for offering us this opportunity just to connect. It's just terrific.
Thank you, Katie. And you bring up a great point about the resources that are available to us. Please know that the Office of Bilingual Education and World Languages is working on a recorded Q&A that will include a lot of your hot topics that we also covered, not really in detail, but in advocacy questioning techniques here. And the Office of Bilingual Education and World Languages and the Arbor and Statewide will also be having live sessions. So please be on the lookout for those, because I would encourage you, some of you were private messaging me in the chat, some very heart-wrenching scenarios where, you know, you're advocating till you're blue in the face and you're exhausted because you are superheroes for continuing to teach through the pandemic online with new technology tools for our ELLs who maybe didn't have that access before. So please know that, you know, if you need that support, that's coming from State Ed, that's coming from NYS TESOL, we've got you in mind, and reach out to your resources as well. So we've got another poll just to kind of gauge what your continued needs are, because we'd love to inform our president of NYS TESOL here, and then using the Padlet as well. What do you need for support in the future?
Okay, I'm going to close the poll. take a look at the results. See if my thing is done there. So it gives you an idea of what, gives us an idea of what you find that you need going forward. And this is information we will share. But thank you so much for your time here. We realize we've gone over our time allotment. We're 6 minutes over. If there are any questions you want to throw on that Padlet after the session ends, please do so. We can always reach back out to you. Again, we're looking for suggestions on resources, webinars, information you're looking for, and we'll do our best to be able to produce that and get that out. Laura, did you want to mention the one pager that you had suggested?
Oh, I was just really amazed at the density of research and work that you all have presented here. And each of this kind of sections of your presentation, you could just go deep on each of those. So I'm sure it was really hard to condense it, but you've provided such good information. And I was just thinking perhaps based on the Q&A that you're getting maybe on the chat or even privately, what people are messaging you and the Padlet, we could create kind of an FAQ along the division of your subsections, like maybe just an FAQ on just the testing issue and an FAQ on, you know, the minutes, advocating for your programming needs, something like that, that we could kind of just take this information and spin it back out. I don't want to create too much more work for you all, but maybe you can just make some bullet points or some of the questions you think are really important, and we can format it and get it out to the community across the state. I mean, sometimes, again, I've said this before, but you know, New York City needs sometimes have felt very distinct from the rest of the state, and I think more than ever, we're really feeling in the same boat. Different boats, same river, whatever the metaphor is. But the leadership, it's really inspiring. I mean, just like you said, all the people on this call on this afternoon, you know, taking their time, who don't log off, you know, because we're here because of the passion for our learners, you know, and we're trying to figure out so much for our own personal lives, our professional lives, trying to get things in place for our learners, their families. And then we're in the context of these structures of schooling, which are quite rigid and can be really challenging to work in the best of times for, you know, providing service for our English learners. But especially now, I think everything that you've brought up today are things we've talked about for years, actually, in the field. But they're just intensified, I think, because of the pandemic. And this is really an important moment for everyone. If you participated on this call, you're a leader. Don't hesitate to reach out and to get more involved. A lot of this is not that any one of us alone knows all these answers, but by pooling our knowledge, we can go back to our schools feeling more empowered. So I really thank everybody, the leaders and organizers, the people like Susan with NYSET and Katie at the UFT. We celebrate you, we need you, and we need each other. So thank you so much. It was an amazing piece of work that you put together, and I think it's going to have a lot of life for the next weeks and months to come. I'm sure hundreds of people are going to be accessing this as a recording. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day and keep putting information in that Padlet.
Yes, thank you, everyone. I dropped a link for the CTLE credit. So anyone who is a NYS TESOL member and would like to receive CTLE credit for attending today's webinar, you can just follow the link. If not, it's on the NYS TESOL website under resources, and you'll see the link there. You just fill out the form, and then within a few days, you should be receiving a email with your credit. The Padlet will remain open. It's under my account. I will keep it open. I will monitor it, and the advocacy team and I will be discussing which questions come up the most and see if we can provide any additional offerings into the fall. Thank you.
What I was supposed to say, don't forget about our conference. I'm really bad. I'm a bad salesperson. But we have a major conference. It's our 50th anniversary. So before you disappear from the Zoom, make sure you go to our website. It would be the day you would normally take off and go to, I don't know, White Plains for a conference. You're going to be able to do it from home. Thank you for putting that up there. We're going to have an absolutely spectacular 2 days with tons and tons of webinars. And for those of you who register, you'll be able to access all of the recordings from all the sessions afterwards. So there's a ton of CTLE there that you can get. And we have obviously the big names like sitting down with Stephen Krashen or Diane Larson Freeman, and we have, oh my gosh, we have so many amazing speakers, but we have just tons of you and us, just regular New York TESOL folks who have a lot of experience. You're going to walk away with so many digital teaching ideas. So we really hope that you make a plan to attend. It will be, I think, a lot of fun and lively. We have a great conference chair, Clara Bowler, and she's really trying to infuse a lot of fun into the sessions. So it won't be, you know, like long, boring, whateverness. It will be awesome, just like this one was, just really full of information. So definitely come to the conference.
All right, I'm going to stop recording and we're going to say goodbye to everybody. So have a great week and great rest of the summer. And we wish you the best as you go back to school.
Have a great year, everyone.